In the ever-turbulent town of Port Charles, where secrets fester beneath every facade and alliances unravel at the drop of a name, the latest developments have cracked the fragile veneer that once held families, friendships, and loyalties in place. What was once seen as hope has now turned to panic, what was once resilience now wavers in uncertainty. On Thursday, July 24, 2025, the unraveling of trust, control, and identity hits multiple families with devastating force, and the consequences are only beginning to manifest. Trina remains a beacon of clarity in the chaos, standing unmoved by the pleas of a man who once had her heart. Kai, desperate and cornered, clings to the fragments of their past, offering contrition that comes far too late. Trina, however, sees through the thin veil of his remorse. She remembers too clearly how easily he chose to align himself with Drew when it mattered most. Now, with Drew's influence metastasizing across Port Charles like a cancer, Trina cannot afford to be pulled back into emotional entanglements that blur the line between affection and betrayal. Her strength is not rooted in bitterness, but in a sober recognition that forgiveness does not equal surrender. Meanwhile, Nina is collapsing under the weight of the reality she helped engineer. Her tears before Ava reveal a truth she can no longer deny: Drew has changed Willow. What began as manipulation has turned into something irreversible. Willow, once a symbol of maternal warmth and emotional resilience, now moves through Port Charles like a shadow of her former self. Her eyes no longer reflect hope or conviction, they reflect confusion, anger, and a dangerous loyalty to the man who is quietly isolating her from everyone who once mattered. Nina had hoped to reach her daughter before Drew's influence turned absolute. But after Portia's warnings, she now realizes the damage may be permanent. At the same time, Carly confronts Sunny in a scene heavy with dread and false relief. Sunny, having successfully coerced Sidwell into withdrawing support for the controversial Measure C, tries to convince Carly that the danger has passed. But Carly has lived beside Sunny long enough to recognize a temporary fix when she sees one. She presses him for answers, hoping for honesty, but what she receives is calculated assurance. The truth remains: Sunny's enemies have multiplied, and his family is still very much in the line of fire. Sidwell may have folded, but others have not. Danger doesn't disappear in Port Charles, it simply changes shape. Portia, once a woman of reason and restraint, now finds herself pushed to the edge. She has spent months watching Drew Kane manipulate those around him, positioning himself as a man of progress while quietly gutting every ethical structure in his path. Now, with Willow slipping further into his control and Trina bracing herself against Kai's emotional blackmail, Portia sees no more room for hesitation. She turns to Curtis, pleading with him to use whatever power he still has. Curtis, ever the strategist, has a final play. Something he has withheld even from Portia in hopes of a cleaner resolution. But time has run out. The window for diplomacy is gone, and Portia knows that if Curtis won't act now, she may have to offer up her medical license, and her freedom, to protect what little remains of their community's moral compass. Elsewhere, Alexis approaches Drew with a tone both urgent and raw. Her request is deceptively simple: let Scout stay in her life. But the subtext runs deeper. Alexis knows Drew's growing control over people often begins subtly, through quiet wedges driven between parents and children, partners and allies. She sees the warning signs in his distant eyes and clipped responses. Alexis suspects that keeping Scout close might be the only way to safeguard the girl's independence before she becomes another cog in Drew's tightening machine. Drew, however, no longer responds to emotion or reason. His answers are cold, transactional. Alexis may have underestimated how far her former friend has fallen. And then comes the moment that sends shudders through every viewer. Scout, wide-eyed and vulnerable, asks Willow if she should call her mom. The innocence in her voice is heartbreaking, but it also exposes the darkness of Drew's plan. He is actively replacing people, identities, and relationships, molding them into a structure that he controls. Willow's silence in that moment is more damning than any spoken confirmation. The Willow that once defied Nina, who once questioned everything, is now a shell tethered to Drew's approval. She doesn't correct Scout. She doesn't resist. She simply accepts. The transformation is nearly complete. Back at the heart of the storm, Trina continues to hold firm against Kai, but her strength comes at a cost. She is watching the people around her surrender, Willow to Drew, Portia to despair, Curtis to secrecy. The battle for truth and justice in Port Charles is no longer one of simple choices. It is a war fought in shadows, through whispered conversations and veiled threats, where every alliance is temporary and every decision has collateral damage. Trina's refusal to forgive Kai is not about vengeance, it is her final act of self-preservation. Meanwhile, Curtis is no longer playing defense. Portia's plea has finally snapped something inside him. Whatever secrets he's been keeping, whatever files or names he's been sitting on, are now in motion. He has realized that Drew doesn't merely want control, he wants erasure. He doesn't seek to coexist with the town's older generation, he seeks to replace them. The new Port Charles, in Drew's mind, is one where he determines who is a parent, who is a partner, who is worthy of trust. That vision is tyrannical, and Curtis knows it. But to stop Drew, Curtis may have to burn down more than just his own reputation. He may have to expose the rot that lives inside the WSB itself, something that will place him, and everyone he loves, directly in harm's way. In the midst of these crumbling alliances, Ava continues to act as Nina's reluctant confidant. But even she is losing patience. Ava sees how far Nina has gone, how blind she was to the very monster she helped raise in Drew. What was once a calculated dance of power between Drew and Nina has devolved into obsession, control, and ruin. Ava warns Nina that there's no fixing this through tears and guilt. If she truly wants to save Willow, it won't be through redemption, it will be through destruction. Something must be dismantled, and fast, before Willow is lost for good. As Thursday's episode fades to black, what lingers is not the chaos but the silence. The moment between Scout and Willow. The tear clinging to Nina's cheek. The pause before Curtis opens the envelope he's kept hidden for weeks. The final breath before Carly realizes Sonny's war is still very much alive. There are no clear victors in Port Charles anymore, only survivors navigating a battlefield where the lines between family and enemy, love and manipulation, have disappeared completely. What lies ahead is a reckoning. Portia is no longer willing to stay silent. Curtis is no longer hiding. Alexis is running out of time. Trina is standing alone. And Drew, at the center of it all, has no idea how many people are planning to bring him down. But in Port Charles, even the best laid plans tend to backfire. And with every hour, the cost of salvation rises.